Let's get started. Welcome everyone to our session on AI, power, myths, misconceptions. I'm going to keep the intros short, so we have 60 minutes to dive a little deeper into the topic, to debunk some myths. I'm really happy to be joined by two local experts, Corinne, Cath, and Cong. I'm a big fan of their work, and I'll promise you after this session you'll be too. I'll introduce both of them in just a minute. The session is gonna work as follows. Introductions, and then each of the two experts are giving us a super short input on a misconception that they encounter in their research or in their everyday life at work. Then we have three myths, three popular narratives that are connected to the work of libraries. After that, we'll have a super short interactive part where you get to talk to the person next to you, and then we'll hopefully have plenty of time for your questions. This session does not require any prior knowledge. We'll do our best to explain technical terms. If there's anything that's not clear, raise your hand and we'll explain. And with that, I'll start with the intros. To my right is Dr. Corinne Cath. She studies artificial intelligence and its computational infrastructure. She is head of Global Team Digital at a local non-profit, human rights non-profit called Article 19, and she's also a research fellow at the Critical Infrastructures Lab of the University of Amsterdam. Corinne's background is in cultural anthropology, and her recent work considers the role of cloud computing in the political economy of generative AI, and she's also reimagining public-private governance on internet infrastructures. In 2023, she published a brilliant book called Eaten by the Internet, so this is something you might want to check out. Welcome, Corinne.
Thank you.
And then also warm welcome to Cong. She's a PhD researcher in sociology at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam, where she carries out her research under the Feminist Generative AI Lab. Her work is also informed by decolonial feminist theories and perspectives, and in her current research she looks at the socio-environmental impact of the Gen AI supply chain through the lens of water. As we know, there's oftentimes a lot of water scarcity in the areas where data centers get built. She's been organizing data walks in Amsterdam since 2022. The first walk was at Science Park, or first the walks were at Science Park, and recently they're at Rotterdam, where Microsoft is building a big hyperscale center. And these walks are a way of collective learning and public engagement, and I really hope we can join one of the talks in the future. Welcome, Jan. And with that, I'll already hand over to Jan for her brief input. Jan, you're going to say something about AI, right? And why there's no one AI.
Yeah, I think as Julia just introduced, I am a researcher at a university right now, and as we all know, there's so much hype about AI and of course also concerns or anxieties, but I also found it's way more helpful to first talk about what is even AI, or is there even a singular AI? I think Corinne and I are in very similar discipline. There are a lot of science and technology scholars who really try to problematize this conception of AI is actually a marketing term. Since the beginning, artificial intelligence was just used by a scientist in order to get US government funding to fund their research in the 60s. And since then, this technology has evolved so much. So there's not this singular technology that's called artificial intelligence. And I think we should also think, when we only talk about AI as this one big thing, who we are benefiting, like who's benefiting from this kind of misconception or this kind of convoluted understanding of technology as this one thing. And I think that the other reason why we have this tendency to call everything just AI is because now we have all these tools, ChatGPT, Claude, they're all what we call general purpose tools. So they also give us this image that their tool is this one solution fit all tool where you can use it to ask a question about what to cook tonight, all the way to if I feel ill, what is the problem with my body? Should I see a doctor or do I have cancer? Right. So I think the way these tools are developed also kind of feed into our tendency of talking about AI as if it's one thing. So I think I would suggest maybe today in our discussion, being more specific about what we are really talking about. If we're talking about ChatGPT, Claude, these kind of chatbots, they are LLM tools. They are just large language model where they generate language in such a way that we read them as if they are said by another person, right? But we also know behind them they're just statistic models where they say things that has some certain meaning that we can understand. And if we talk about, I don't know, journalists using certain tools to translate documents, it could be AI, but we also know that we have Google Translate way before the current AI hype, right? We need to be way more specific about what is an AI tool or what exactly is the technology that now a lot of the companies are saying this is AI, or AI is claiming to be so powerful, but actually behind it a lot of the things could not be just simply summarized as AI. I think maybe I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you. We also talked about this example from the fake AI book with the vehicles. Do you want to share that?
Yes.
Yeah, because I think it's very tangible.
Yes, I think I heard this example from two people. One is Karen Howe, who wrote this book called Empires of AI, and then also this other book called, I think, AI Snake Oil, from this other duo scholars from computer science, I think. So they said, AI is kind of like transportation. It's like a group of technology. So we never would compare bicycle to a private jet, right? Even though they both fall under this category called transportation. So how can we talk about AI as if it's one thing, right? There are AI that is a chatbot. There is also certain kind of climate model that can help us to predict climate disasters. There's also protein folding model that help us finding new proteins, but these are not, we're just currently calling all of them AI, and it's not really helpful to think about it that way.
Thank you so much, Jan. Corinne, what's a misconception that you encounter in your research?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for waiting on me. I am in one of my favorite places here in Amsterdam, the big OBA library. And I also wanted to say thank you because I know that people who are either librarians or work in libraries in other ways or come to libraries often, as I often do with my kids, have a grasp of knowledge and power and information in a way that the debate about AI needs much more of. So if anything, I'm really excited to be able to learn from you because you are the real experts when it comes to a lot of these topics. One of the things that I run into in my work is the misconceptions around AI being able to provide people with better or more accurate or faster access to information. And what I've seen through my research is that that is not at all the case. Because as Jan was already saying, AI is not one thing. And more importantly, it doesn't just fall out of thin air. Right? There is a whole economy of big tech companies that have different sorts of vested interest in pushing these technologies onto people. And the thing that I've run into is that when you look at how they actually produce especially generative AI tools, so Claude, ChatGPT, a lot of these things that many of us will use or loathe or both, is that how they do it is they use these tools called a scraper. And a scraper is essentially a little machine that just runs across the entirety of the internet multiple times a day to take essentially very large screenshots of all of the information that it encounters. And it then, whether that is, information that is copyrighted, not copyrighted, openly accessible, whether the people who have put that information there have said, I would rather this not be used for LLMs, or whether they are fine with it, these machines, they just run across the internet somewhat like locusts. And in my research, I've spoken to multiple organizations, including some famous open information repositories like Wikipedia and others, who have said these scrapers really are like locusts to us. Because these are bots, these are machines, these are not human readers. But because they come to our website so often, and because they ask for so much information, the cost for us to run Wikipedia have gone up and up and up. And it's not exactly like organizations like that already have a lot of money to go around to be able to keep that information accessible to everyone. And I feel that there's a real need to put this costs of AI on the radar for people, because for many consumers this feels like it's free. But in the end, they are paying in different ways. And Wikipedia themselves have said, because of these LLM systems, because of these locusts that are constantly pinging our website, sometimes it's harder for human readers to get the information that they need. Now, this is one example, but I'm sure it holds across many different other websites whose sole purpose it is to make sure that people have access to accurate, reliable information. And I'm sure that this is something that speaks to everyone in the room here. So if there's one takeaway from my end that I think we all need to be pushing for, is to make really clear what the costs are of generative AI and who is paying those.
Thank you. Let's dive a little deeper into this. With our first myth, because Corinne, now I could claim, right, like you as a researcher, you have access to all these papers, right? And you can read them. Sometimes you don't have the time to read them, maybe. But still, right, like some people can now access them via Claude, ChatGPT. So we companies, let me take the role of the companies, are really all about like access to knowledge and about democratizing that access to knowledge. So what would you tell me?
That's an excellent marketing line. It is, however, not true. I think I can get behind opening up academic knowledge, and I think the question there is to go via Elsevier or Sci-Hub. But the thing about this is that the information is partial. So sometimes they will have access to particular papers, but you don't get to the source. And at the end of the day, I mean, and again, I'm in a room full of librarians, so this is really silly to say, but you need to be able to make sure that sometimes these machines are wrong. And what we want is the proper information to be available, and not the information filtered through the lens of Google or filtered through the lens of ChatGPT. That is not the same. That is half-baked. And so if that is going to be the solution, and if that is going to be the marketing, we need to push back and be like, listen, if you care about free information, then maybe you should step aside, because you are now an additional filter to this information.
Yeah, do you want to add something?
I think the marketing line that you just said, actually if you change the technology, change it back to internet, change it to, I don't know, radio, TV, every time we have a new technology, this has been the promise to us, right? This new technology is going to transform our lives because it's going to distribute information in such a way that we've never seen before, and it's going to help everyone learn and remember all of these mass online courses where we thought we can even get rid of universities because it's going to democratize knowledge. Of course, university is a problem institution. I'm in it, right? But I think maybe I just approach it from another perspective. What is knowledge? It's not just information, right? We are here. We are. I think I am also informed by all these feminists and decolonial theory where we try to understand knowledge beyond just this kind of Western understanding of it's this objective information that sits in our head. I think this is also something when we do data center walks that become very obvious when you of course you can get ChatGPT to summarize the environmental impact of data centers and you get all these numbers and facts, but it's very different when you are in that environment and you feel it, right? You see the trees and you see the ground, or you see the construction sites, or you see the building, and I think that is something a lot of the technologies actually cannot give us, and that is the social relations that we have with each other that is actually increasingly being replaced by a lot of the technologies because it keeps atomizing ourselves, right? I see my students, they don't talk to each other to read each other's work anymore because they think ChatGPT has the authority to correct their grammar or to come up with the template for them to write their paper. But if we think about it, we used to do it with each other a lot more without these technologies. And I'm not against the technologies overall, but yeah, in this case, I think we should be very careful about when these technologies are replacing our existing social relations. That is actually something I think at the library that we also try to foster.
Yeah.
And we can, let's take search, right? We already get the summaries on top of every Google search, and studies show that once we get the summary, we are 50% less likely to click on links and to go to the actual source. And if you read latest news reports, then Google wants to move even more toward this direction of becoming an answer machine, right? Which is tricky for journalism and for many other fields, and probably is going to destroy the open web. Let's move on to our next myth. If we don't adapt AI now, we will be left behind.
Yeah. Left behind from what? This and it's worrisome how alive this thinking is, and it is also worrisome how one-dimensional it is. One of the very fun things that I have done this week is I've gone through 700 pages of the European Commission's tech sovereignty package, so that none of you have to. And the thing that stood out to me most is how bought in politicians at that level are that we need AI. And if you then ask this question of what do we need it for, you get a quite, again, one-dimensional answer of we need to improve competition in Europe. And if you then start to provide, well, why, how, who will benefit, and how will that change things like, for instance, the cost of living crisis, or the housing market crisis that we have here in Amsterdam, but in many other places, and then you don't really get an answer. So we are thundering towards this future where we're squeezing labor, where we're trying to just get competition for the sake of competition, and it is entirely clear what that does to people's quality of life. So whenever I see questions like this, I get really nervous because it is a trajectory where there's also a lot of assumptions that we don't know if they're true, right? There's quite a bit of research coming out right now that shows that this notion of productivity and productivity increases, supposedly by AI, do not hold up. So it does not necessarily mean that there is more productivity in the workforce. But what we do see is that it leads to not hiring young people, firing lots of people whose jobs are now considered not to be useful anymore. So we're making all of these really big population level decisions that impact people's lives, having a job, being able to get a job, and we're doing it on the basis of what exactly? Like whenever I see this claim, I'm like, can you bring me the receipts before we all start running?
I think maybe I'll just add one thing, because I think Corinne said it so well. Who are we, right? We are kind of assuming that in Europe, if we adopted all these tools, it will bring us all these solutions to the problems we have. But like I think Corinne already mentioned in the earlier questions, these tools are very material tools, right? It requires so much labor, so much raw material, and it generates so much environmental damage in order to produce these tools. So we can just ask random questions to these chatbots in our daily life. And most of these consequences, we don't really feel it here in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And I won't even say Europe, because in order to produce these tools, Europe is also trying to onshore a lot of mining within the periphery of Europe, right? But usually we will think about the data labeling labor that is in Africa, in Kenya a lot, and in India, in Madagascar, in Venezuela, depending on the language that these workers are labeling, and also thinking about the raw materials, the minerals that are mined in Congo, or the chips that are produced 95% in Taiwan, that requires a lot of water and energy. None of these is happening here, right? So we don't feel it on a visceral level. And yeah, so I think who are we, and who is really benefiting from it, and who is bearing the cost? And yeah, like Corinne said, when we see the receipt, a lot of the costs actually don't even come to us, and we're just enjoying the product of these technological tools.
Thank you, Jan. Are you saying that there's millions of people working behind the scenes so that we have systems that we believe are automated? Is that what you're hinting at? And like, what does this work look like? Why do we need it?
Well, you know better than me, right? I know SUPERRR also has done a lot of work with all these data labeling workers. Yes, so actually these jobs also didn't just suddenly appear. These are workers who used to moderate all our problematic contents on social media platforms, right? There's all of these armies of shadow workers who had to go through the most violent or problematic contents and clean them up so that we don't get traumatized by it. And later on, if we think about self-driving cars, how are these cars able to even recognize another car on the road or understand the traffic signal? These are all workers who work on computers and creating these little square boxes to basically label every single thing that you can see. So these workers say they are the eyes of these technologies, and I think the Data Labeling Association from Kenya, they also said if we say AI, artificial intelligence, but from their point of view, it's African intelligence, because without their labor, none of these models will actually work. But then from their point of view, if you look at how much they're compensated, it's really crazy, this kind of imbalance of power, and how I think this is also why Karen Howe in her book called it the empires of AI, right? We really see this pattern of colonialism, of how certain group of people, their labor and their knowledge and their resource is exploited and then it's extracted and benefiting another group of people elsewhere.
So AI is based on a lot of exploitation, and a lot of the externalities are elsewhere, right? But I know that both of you also do research on the physical infrastructure of the internet. What are the effects that people in Amsterdam will get to experience once, like, the new hyperscaler that we just talked about goes onto the grid? Like, yeah, how will they notice that there's a new big data center?
The cost of our energy bills will go up. The available amount of drinking water will go down. The availability of affordable housing will be postponed. The number of schools and daycares will reduce. Small local businesses will have a harder time greening their businesses because there's not enough electricity for them to do it. What else have people talked to me about? There will be less space to provide support for people with challenges reintegrating back into society. And this is just from the one data center that they're building outside of one of the big stations here in Amsterdam. So Jan and I have both been part of a coalition that essentially in November last year, what happened is a bunch of us went for a walk just to air out after a long meeting. And we noticed this really weird plot of land. And we started looking into it, and it turned out that there was going to be a big data center built there. And but in addition to my day job, I'm part of an NGO called Leitmotiv, and we do research on the impact of data centers on the environment. And so with Leitmotiv, we wrote this letter, and we just asked the municipality and a bunch of other institutions, like, what is this? And as we started to dig deeper and deeper, we brought along a number of investigative journalists here in the Netherlands, and they figured out that this data center, which was initially going to be built and be available to a lot of different people for use, had been leased by Microsoft and Microsoft only. And that this data center, once it was built, would be using as much energy as all of the current households in Amsterdam combined. And that is while we have very severe net congestion here. So there isn't enough energy in our grid right now to build affordable housing, to build daycares, schools, all of these public facilities that people need. And yet somehow here the choice was made to put one single big tech company over the needs of everyone in this city. And that is just one example. One of the things that Jan and I have both done is worked with different coalitions across Europe, but also much more broadly. We also work with a lot of activists in Latin America, who in many ways are like way ahead of the curve here, right? Because environmental work and land defenders there have long seen this issue of data centers and water depletion. And the thing that I try to keep stressing, and the thing that we try to stress in our communications around this data center, is this is an everybody problem. Right? Sometimes it feels like, oh, digital rights, that's a little bit for the privileged because you only have to care about, the worst thing that could happen to you is if someone violates your privacy. But these kind of questions will impact every single one of us. Everyone's bills will go up. Everyone will have a harder time accessing public facilities because they won't get built. And what we really try to do in the debate is put that front and center and then ask the hard political question, what on God's green earth were you thinking putting big tech before the people who live here or the people who live anywhere, for that matter?
I think I just want to add one thing, because Corinne has given a very good summary of what's happening here. I think there's a consensus, at least in Europe, or at least in the Netherlands, let's put it that way. In the Netherlands, we have enough compute. And I think it's also Leitmotiv's research where they really look at the capacity of power from all of the data center players. And in fact, they have booked way more from the grid than the actual energy they can consume. So there's also this kind of gentrification going on where they are trying to hoard these resources while we have all these housing crises and schools and swimming pools couldn't be built because there's no capacity on the grid. And that is not because there's not enough energy, but because the energy has been booked by the data center industry. And they haven't, the fact that they haven't even been able to use the full capacity means that there's not enough people using it. And meanwhile, they're still building more. And we're also seeing EU pushing this AI factories initiative, trying to give more funding, encourage more players to get into building these data centers. But who will actually use it for what?
Thank you. Before we move to our next myth that's like very much connected to libraries, I would like to ask all of you to turn to the person next to you and to briefly for 3 minutes discuss what are narratives, what are myths that come up in your work or come up in conversations with friends. Yeah, let's do a quick round. If you don't feel like talking, you can also think about it. Who wants to share what narratives they've talked about? Yeah.
Hello, really great to hear from you all. I am an online safety campaigner and a journalist from the UK, and what I'm hearing a lot is that
AI chatbots will solve loneliness. And I'm thinking a lot about digitally excluded people, but particularly older people who are lonely, and how can librarians sort of safeguard them? And obviously it shouldn't be up to librarians to do that safeguarding work, but how can we, safeguard them in their use of chatbots? Because of course, we can say don't use it, but obviously people are intrigued, people are lonely, so there's a valid reason for people going to those tools. And yeah, I'd love to hear your books on that.
Thank you. Who wants to take it? Loneliness. Huge problem, not only for loneliness, not only for the elderly. And I think the tricky part here is exactly what you have expressed, that people will be using it, and that at the end of the day, it doesn't really resolve the crisis of loneliness. Because these are, statistical machines that just string together words that they think belong together, but there's no meaning behind it. And I think the biggest problem more broadly of these types of AI machines is that they seem to take these problems away, because now people do feel that they have someone to talk to. And Jan and I were talking about students not talking to each other, but using bots instead of figuring stuff out collectively. And I think that is what the real limitations of these machines are versus humans, right? We, and Jan already said this more beautifully than I could, we are sense-making machines, quote unquote. We don't just process information as it comes in, but we imbue it with values, with our politics, with particular ambitions we have for ourselves and for the world. And the moment that you start to introduce these kind of machines in super sensitive human areas, whether that's taking care of the elderly, medicine, journalism, education, you seemingly solve certain problems that these fields feel they have, right? You make particular things seem more accessible or seem cheaper, but in the long run, you are not doing anything about the structural problems that lead to elderly folks being alone or people struggling with going to university. And so the thing that I would always propose is, fine, you have people who are lonely and they want to use these machines, then have them come together in a library with other elderly people using these machines and do a little bit of what we're doing right now. Do like a one-on-one on what are these machines, and have them talk to each other about these machines. So, and it's a bit of a gimmick, because we all know that under the current neoliberalization and austerity politics, it's really hard to get the kind of public funding that down the line we need for a lot of these issues that AI is now being used for as a bit of a crutch. But it's these type of workarounds where we constantly try to remind people of our social nature and try to foment that, even if it is by way of this technology. Thank you. Any other, maybe also questions? Hello.
My name is Andres. I come from Greece. I'm a deaf, and I have been raised in two different worlds, in the hearing world and the deaf world. Okay, in the deaf world, let's say, the AI thing is not that common. I mean, in the hearing world, there is a lot of information that we don't have access. We don't know all the data. And I'm sure that, as you already mentioned, that if I ask for an information like about feminism or about rights, human rights and everything, I'm not getting the right answer always. So I have to search more for this. So I don't know what's the right way, let's say, to look for the right information in this kind of things when I'm in the hearing world. Again, I'm saying. I hope it was clear.
Thank you. So does it sometimes take us more time, more energy to then find like the right bits of information, the right answers?
I think back in the days when there's social media, there's already a lot of talk about information literacy, right? And I think with these chatbots, we all know this phenomenon called hallucination, right? So I think it's even harder to get the right information as you have described. I think this is an experience that a lot of people have encountered. We were just talking about how, for example, in my teaching, a lot of students will use fake references that are just generated by these chatbots. Or Julia was talking about how libraries in Berlin constantly getting requests of fake books, like books that do not exist. So I think one way to do it is, of course, always try to go back to the source. A lot of these chatbot tools right now also try to give you some sources, but then you will have to go back and read the original source and then make a judgment whether this is correct or not. And I think now we're already describing a process where it's sold to you as convenient, as efficient, as easy, but then while you're verifying everything, you're actually doing way more work than we used to when we just Google it or find some information directly from a reliable source. So I would say if you can, there's this remove AI function on a lot of platforms where you can just do -AI, or I think there's some, like with DuckDuckGo, you can install this plugin. So you can go back to the original search. But even with search, I think a lot of searching is also getting more and more shitty because they're putting more resource and energy into these LLM search. So also be careful and make sure you always verify the source. And I think that takes us back to like maybe 10 years ago when we talk about how we verify information on social media and online. I don't know if that answers your question.
Great. Yeah, and the companies would probably claim, right, like it's only a couple of percentage where we are wrong, where we're hallucinating. But then if we have like 5 trillion search requests, that's still like millions of wrong answers, like wrong facts, historic facts, names, and so on. I saw questions in the back.
I work in research too, and the first thought I always had when I hear about this bubble and everything, the AI thing, is that do we really, as human beings, need to ask AI to draft us an email, for example? And that's and for me, and I mean, I'm an historian, okay, so I don't do technology, I don't do this type of things. I'm not the boring person in the room, but my question is always on the personal level, because I understand tech and this and that, but on our level, when we use a tool, we are enforcing this, we are outsourcing something that we used to do 2 days before. We did it 2 days before, we can do it 2 days after. And the question is, why are we outsourcing basic things like writing an email, drafting a PPT, asking, how do I cook tiramisu? Like, it's not, we don't need AI for this. It's, yes, not AI, I'm wrong. We don't need AI for this. So that's exactly, I mean, my question is, despite big data question, the big information technology and all the industries and all the businesses, how can we stop using it for things that we used to do without AI before? And I know this, I mean, of course, it's the egg or the chicken, but can we somehow, and is it enough, would you say it's enough, to just stop in our own small life, to stop doing this? And would you think that you know this word better than I do, that this would be enough to send some kind of signal, we don't need this on the basic level of our lives? Because I think then the topic of medicine, the topic of like big data mining and everything, I'm not an expert, so I cannot say if we need this or not. But on the basis of our life, also, is it doable without it? And do you think there is a future without it also?
Thank you. We've been talking about friction. We've been talking about friction a little bit. Like, who of you wants to take this on?
I mean, refusal is the most powerful tool we have, right? I think the fact that, actually this is also from our friend Yang in London, she talked about this yesterday, the fact that these tools actually rely on us to exist. It relies on our data to become, it scraped all of our data on the internet, right? It relies on our data. It also relies on us as their customers to use it. So of course it can make us feel powerless because it's sold to us in such a way and there's so much hype, but at the same time, it means we also have agency in this, and the smallest thing we can do is refusal. We can stop using it on an individual level. And of course, I also acknowledge that for some people who are neurodivergent, maybe it's easier for them to have certain technological help to draft an email, of course, we can also approach this with a more relational way rather than just we just ban it, but stop using it on your daily life when you don't think it's necessary, and then also organize with other people. I think there's a lot of refusals that's going on right now. We are thinking ourselves as the consumer of it, but from a labor perspective, a lot of people are also putting their labor and their knowledge in producing these tools, and there are tech workers organizing, resisting against this within the companies or outside companies. Or we are also citizens, for example, we live in Amsterdam. That's why we organize to resist, or we at least organize to raise awareness about this data center, right? So we can also think about all the different roles we have. We're not just passive consumers of these technology, but if we are consumers, we can also resist. But then also think about the other roles and how you can also activate that and connect with other people to resist. True.
Always great to have historians in the room. Some of the best books that I have read have been written by historians, including when it comes to these questions of technology. Mar Hicks, Nathan Entberger, there's just a lot of really great people there, so great to have you here. So I completely concur with what Jan said, and one of the issues is that in this debate, we often tend to think of AI as something that is a consumer-first technology, and it is not. And again, as a historian, I'm sure you are very sensitive to these questions of larger, how does production change in society? How do things get made? How do industrial revolutions happen? And the tricky thing, and this is also what I saw again going through those 700 pages of European Commission documents, is that a lot of their focus in terms of their quote-unquote apply AI strategy, and my colleague at Leitmotiv wrote a great blog about it called High on AI yesterday, just so you can imagine what the critique was there, is that they are not focused on getting individual consumers, us in the room here, to use more of it. But they have realized that, for instance, there's different types of industries within Europe, whether that's ports, agriculture, you name it. The automobile industry actually has a lot of industrial data. And so that industrial data, they think, is really crucial in our ability to develop new AI systems that are really meant for particular industries. So for me, if we want to think through how do we make sure that in an ideal world you refuse and you resist, but then also apply that refusal or that resistance to the industrial side of AI use. Because otherwise, while it is incredibly important that all of us fly less, maybe don't eat meat, don't use straws, that will never weigh up against the entirety of the aviation industry or the entirety of the meat agricultural industry. So I think one of the things, and this is mostly sort of a critique on the work also that I myself do, is trying to figure out how to engage with that side of the problem. Because if we don't tackle it, then we are definitely moving debates, but are we winning the larger battle behind it? I'm not sure, we're not yet, but that is where we need to get.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes left. There's one question, and then we still owe you the maybe one-line answer to libraries need AI to stay relevant. So I want to ask you to be brief.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the points you mentioned, and I am completely agree with you because I'm glad that I came from Bulgaria. We are a little behind in this, and for me it's good now when I hear all these things here. But as of last year, because I'm very fortunate to work in a library, but I'm also working in the university, and my specialty is AI. And the first thing I do with my colleagues in the library is I started workshops about how to protect ourselves from the AI. And the first important thing I teach them is be absolutely critical to AI. Never trust it, because yesterday we have a workshop in the Goethe Institute, and I have a simple task for my students and for my colleagues. Do one and the same task without and with AI, but check the sources. And as I told my students in the university, because they use AI for their sources, it's absolutely bad, because it's not true. They don't follow the links, and there is no information like that. So what you say is a really big problem about the industry. There is the big problem because they are driven by one thing: money. This is the problem with the industry, because yes, on the personal level, in the libraries, we can be the centers to learn people not to trust AI, to be self-sufficient, to not use it. But when you tackle industries, there's a big problem, because they are greedy. This is a simple thing. Thank you.
What's your name?
I'm Nikolai.
Nikolai. So if people are interested in running AI workshops in their libraries, they should speak to Nikolai. Thank you. Let's close by your take on this myth behind us.
I think maybe I'll just build on what Nikolai said. I think the critical engagement with AI as like a way of teaching or making sense of this technological tool can be something that's very, very helpful for people to understand what it exactly is, and it can also help us to push against this kind of hype of, you know, this one magical tool that we all need to solve all of our societal issues, all the way from people being lonely to, you know, all of these things that climate change, whatever. Yeah, I think, especially also the facts, I think that this point about money is really important too. Like, we are here all as public libraries, right? We are public institutions, and I think profit is not something that's driven people running libraries, I assume. It's probably not a very profitable business. So yeah, really go back to the values and the missions and what a library is and what it means to work in a library, to build a community around the space within your community, and then see how AI can fit into that. And probably it won't fit very well, or, you know, take what's useful for it, but then engage with it very critically.
I think between Jan and Nikolai, it's been said all, no is anything. We need libraries to stay relevant.
And with that's a great closing statement. Thank you so much for all of you to joining us, for your questions, your reflections. Thank you to Corinne and for Jan for your expertise. We could go so much deeper, but thank you.